my company suffered some casualties, including two boys from the engineer regiment who were attached to my company. The shell landed inside their trench. So they were blown up into smithereens and their body parts were strung up on the trees on top.
नमस्कार दोस्तों और जय हिंद। आप सभी को स्वागत है इन माय चैनल 1971 वॉर बुक सीरीज। तो दोस्तों, इन दिस 6th एपिसोड ऑफ पॉन्चीज वॉर, जहां पे वी हैव इंक्लूडेड मेजर चंद्रकांत सिंह टू टॉक अबाउट हिज एक्सपीरियंसेस इन द 1971 बांग्लादेश लिबरेशन वॉर. In this episode, he will be specifically talking about the movement of his battalion from Akhaura to Brahmanbaria and eventually moving up to Ashuganj and commencing the Meghna airlift operations as well. Before going to the operations, we will be mostly talking about his movement and the works of the battalion to secure Brahmanbaria and Ashuganj area. So instead of wasting any more time, let's welcome Major Chandrakant Singh, Veer Chakra, to our program today. So today we'll be talking about the movement from Akhaura to Brahmanbaria, your battalion's movement, sir.
Okay. As I said earlier, on the 7th morning, we had, after capturing Akhaura on this the 6th or 5th, 6th night, 7th morning, we had cut off the link between the Pakistani 14th Division at Brahmanbaria with the Pakistani division at Kumila, 39th Division. The name of the Pakistani division commander at Brahmanbaria was Abdul Majid.
Qazi Abdul Majid, right.
Yes. And in Kumila, it was, I think, Abdul Rahim.
Major General Rahim, right.
Rahim.
So what I'm saying is that Major General Rahim, I think he was wounded from an Indian Air Force airstrike.
He really wasn't wounded. There is talk of it. He claimed he was wounded.
Okay.
And that claim has an interesting thing. They're jumping the gun. But just before the Pakistani surrender, the Pakistan Air Force had arranged to evacuate the Pakistani nurses from Dhaka to Burma.
Okay.
General Rahim landed up in Dhaka, threw out the lady nurses from the helicopter, got into the helicopter himself and ran away to Burma.
Okay.
Subsequently, of course, I think he was court-martialed and an inquiry when he returned to Bangladesh. But that was the psyche of the Pakistani commanders.
Right. Makes sense, of course.
And that's on record, written by from the Pakistanis officers who have written about the 71 war.
Okay.
Having cut off the link between these two divisions on the 7th morning, my battalion was tasked to send out one patrol westwards towards the bank of the Meghna river, another company northwards to Brahmanbaria, and one company southwards to a place called Saidabad.
Okay.
Which was basically to see if there are any Pakistani troops there. But by then, that area had been completely cleared off.
Okay.
On the 8th morning, uh, our brigade commander, Brigadier R.N. Mishra, VRC, fetched up in our battalion location and asked my commanding officer, Colonel Himmat Singh, to join him for a reconnaissance to the Meghna river.
Okay.
This is where we were at a place called Arhand. And they took off for a reconnaissance to that area to find possible crossing places.
Acha.
To find possible crossing places. It was a reconnaissance trip. While they were out, I get a message. Now, I told you earlier that I wasn't officially the second in command, but being the senior most officer after the commanding officer and company commander, I had to stand in for the second in command. I got a message directly from our divisional commander, General Gonzalez, to bring the battalion to Brahmanbaria. Now here I was in a bit of a dilemma. See, the army has a very strict chain of command. I received command from my battalion commander. He gets it from the brigade commander, and the brigade commander gets it from the divisional commander, and so on to the top.
To the top, right.
You don't bypass the chain of command. So I told the general that, sir, my commanding officer is out in a reconnaissance with the brigade commander, and I cannot reach them on my wireless set,
Okay.
on my radio set. So what do? He said, okay, I will instruct his senior operations staff officer. He was an Anglo-Indian officer, and the name is slipping, who had a more powerful radio set to communicate with them. But he says, you bring your battalion towards Brahmanbaria, and I will meet you personally on the road.
Okay.
At that moment, the day before on the 7th, Shami Mehta's tanks had also fetched up with us.
Acha.
So some of us, my company, leading the way, mounted on his tanks, other following on foot. Brahmanbaria was about 10 or 12 kilometers north of us. We reached Brahmanbaria. The bridge on the small river called the Pagla River,
Okay.
which rises somewhere in the Kachars, and then joins the Meghna.
Now, I had a question, sir. The Meghna is
Yes.
a very huge river.
Yes.
Right. I mean, I've seen that side, and there are islands in the middle. It's like small
Yes.
islands.
Yes.
So, finding a suitable crossing point, I think even infantry can cross by country boats. That's what I get. But
Yes.
how did you get your equipment and everything across? Like,
We'll come to that some later.
okay,
Because that is when we get down to the actual crossing.
okay,
We'll come to it later. So here we're just talking of the preliminaries.
okay,
So it took us about 3 hours to get to the bridge on the Pagla River, which had been blown up by the Pakistanis. And I met the divisional commander there, General Gonzalez. He had already arrived there in his helicopter. He says he had flown over Brahmanbaria, and it appears that the Pakistanis have evacuated Brahmanbaria.
acha,
So he told me to cross the river.
Okay.
The bridge was blown up. Now, easier said than done. Here's infantry, with the equipment weighed down with their 50-kilogram haversacks, rifles,
Right.
other heavy equipment, and I also had a squadron of tanks. That is Shami Mehta's tanks.
Right.
Now they were amphibious. So it took us some time to prepare for that. We sent out parties to look for country boats. We found some. So most of our infantry was able to cross, in all of it, in the country boats. Shami Mehta's tanks also crossed over on their own path. They could float. But by then, what had happened at Akhaura was we had captured 3 Pakistani PT-76 tanks.
Right. Right.
Their floating equipment was not in perfect working order.
Acha.
So that took us some time for Shami to sort of fix that. But by midday, 12 o'clock, we were across the Pagla River and on the outskirts. Brahmanbaria is virtually on the river.
Okay.
And at this time, my commanding officer had also joined us.
Okay.
So our first thing was we carried out a search of Brahmanbaria. During the search, we searched the headquarters of Pakistani 14 Division. According to General Sadat, who visited this later, now we are talking of the 8th of December. The division headquarters was so well fortified that it could perhaps stand a nuclear attack. There was air conditioning in it.
How were these fortifications done, sir?
Oh, well, see, they had got a lot of aid for that cyclone Bhola, which they diverted for the defensive, for their use.
That cyclone was in 1970.
End of 1970, and we are talking of things. So millions of dollars had come in from foreign aid, and all of it had been diverted, nothing given to the people, but all of it diverted. In the divisional headquarters, I found the bodies of 6 of our own soldiers of 10 Bihar with their hands tied behind their backs and shot in the back of the heads. General Sadat Singh, in his own account, has mentioned this. General Gonzalez also saw it, and his words in front of me was that when the war is done with, he will make sure that Major General Abdul Majid, the Pakistani commander, would be court-martialed.
This is war crime.
Beg your pardon? It's a war crime. And there's a very nice photograph taken of Abdul Majid surrendering to General Gonzalez after the war on 17th or 18th of at Brahmanbaria. And the funny thing is, handing over the pistol to General Gonzalez, and he's got a smile on his face.
Sir. Even I've seen that.
I'll make that photograph available to you.
Even I have that photograph.
Well, I'm the one who's put it out. It was taken, the photograph was taken by this photograph of the Stern magazine in Indian, J. Ulal.
Okay.
We obviously picked up a lot of photographs which J. Ulal has taken, and I put them out into the public domain. Then, after we had sort of cleared Brahmanbaria, we were given orders to advance to the next destination, which is Ashuganj, which is on the eastern bank of the Meghna River, where the Coronation Bridge, the only bridge on the Meghna River at that time, existed. In Brahmanbaria, we had found some transport and a few other things. but not very much.
Okay.
Uh, the distance between Brahmanbaria and Ashuganj was about, I think, about 10 or 12 kilometers. So it took us about 3 or 4 hours on foot. On the way, we met, and my company was mounted on Shami Mehta's tanks, so we were able to move fast. The rest of the battalion followed on foot. 2 kilometers short of Ashuganj, we had a skirmish with the Pakistanis. One of our company commanders, Major Chandrakant, was grievously wounded in the leg. Fortunately, in the leg, so he survived. We lost 2 or 3 men, but we cleared the position. And by the afternoon, before it got dark, we had occupied Ashuganj.
Okay.
That is on the home bank, eastern bank of the Meghna River. And dug down to protect ourselves against any Pakistan activity. We were shelled quite heavily by the Pakistanis. My company suffered some casualties, including two boys from the engineer regiment who were attached to my company. The shell landed inside their trench. So they were blown up into smithereens and their body parts were strung up on the trees on top.
As far as I know, sir, Ashuganj was a very well defended locality before.
Yes, but they evacuated Ashuganj without a fight, with a skirmish. The actual battle for Ashuganj took place the next day.
Acha.
That requires a separate thing, but in which my battalion was not involved.
Okay.
We had occupied Ashuganj quite easily, just with a couple of skirmishes. In the evening, my commanding officer assembled all the officers in the battalion headquarters, and our battalion headquarters was in the local masjid, because we chose it purposely because being a masjid, we thought the Pakistanis would not shell it.
Acha.
And by this time, luckily for us, our supplies had caught up with us because there was a road, including some whiskey. So we had a good whiskey in the evening. And my battalion commander received a radio message
Acha.
that the next morning at 6 o'clock, he had to return to Brahmanbaria and meet the brigade commander.
Okay.
So he told me, he says, my name in the army given to me while I was in MDA is Paunchy, because I always had a bloody paunch. Paunchy, I have to go back tomorrow morning at 6 o'clock. You are in charge. Take care. I said, Roger, sir. So early in the morning, by that time our jeeps had caught up. At 4 o'clock, he left our battalion to go back to Brahmanbaria to meet the brigade commander. And I was left in charge of the battalion. In the morning, I did a tour of our battalion location. Everything was well. Occasional exchange of fire, artillery fire, machine gun fire, but nothing serious. At 10 o'clock that morning, I get a message from my commanding officer on the radio. Chandrakant, bring the battalion back to Brahmanbaria.
Acha.
I said, sir, we are in contact with the enemy. Eyeball to eyeball confrontation. I cannot just evacuate my positions and come back. It's against the conventional military tactics. He says, don't worry, 18 Rajputs and 10 Bihar are moving in,
अच्छा.
but they may take some time. You move out and come back. It is urgent.
Okay.
So I was quite happy, collected our men, and we marched back to Brahmanbaria, which we got there at about 12 o'clock.
Okay.
Now, why we had been called back to Brahmanbaria was that and why my CEO had been called back early morning was that General Sagat, in the meantime, the night before, had planned that he would cross the Meghna River by helicopters.
अच्छा.
Now, after we left Ashuganj and came back, there was a very serious battle in Ashuganj involving 18 Rajputs and 10 Bihar, where we suffered a bit of a setback. I think 18 Rajputs had about almost 150 to 200 casualties.
Casualties.
Casualties, but let's stick to the Meghna crossing. The Meghna battle was the most crucial battle in the whole campaign in Bangladesh. I would say it is as crucial a battle as the Battle of Waterloo or any other great battle that has taken place in history, because it changed the course of the war.
Right.
Now we are talking of 9th of December. 9th of December, we'll get into the details later. We crossed the Meghna River by helicopters.
अच्छा.
These helicopters were not meant for any offensive task, they were meant for evacuating our own casualties.
Okay.
But General Sagat used them in that purpose. 9th, I was in the first helicopter that crossed the Meghna River.
अच्छा.
In the helicopter was my commanding officer, the senior Air Force commander, Air Marshal Chandan Singh, that time Group Captain Chandan Singh.
Good captain.
The pilot was the flight leader, that time Flight Lieutenant Push Vaid.
Push brave.
And I go back a little to what happened in the morning. While they were, my commanding officer had gone for a reconnaissance with my brigade commander and General Sagat Singh. That helicopter was shot up by the Pakistanis and a bullet grazed General Sagat Singh's forehead. Like this chap Trump,
Right.
a centimeter this way would have been wrong. A centimeter, half a centimeter, we would have lost Sagat Singh. As I said earlier, that the battle of the Meghna, the crossing of the Meghna, was the most crucial battle. We crossed over on the night of 9th and 10th of December. 10th morning, as reported in the New York Times, the BBC reporter embedded in Nazi's headquarters, Gavin Young,
Okay.
filed a report which was published in the New York Times a little later, citing Nazi that he has sent a signal to the general headquarters in Rawalpindi that the Indians have crossed the Meghna River. He has no troops left to defend Dhaka, and there's no option but to surrender, or Rawalpindi is to arrange for a ceasefire. That is the importance of the Battle of the Meghna. The Pakistanis, or nobody thought that we could cross it. Now, this Battle of the Meghna requires a very detailed and long meeting between you and me. I've written a book,
River of victory. Right.
the Meghna, the River of Victory. It was released this year at the Jaipur Literature Festival.
Okay.
The two most important commanders who made this possible, the plan was by General Sadat Singh, Corps Commander, his biography written by me.
Right.
This is the one that was released this year at the Jaipur Literature Festival. The Meghna was released 2 years ago. And my wife had designed the cover. And the senior Air Force commander, that time Group Captain, later Air Marshal Chandrakant Singh, whom also I had the pleasure and privilege to know. I wrote his biography 4 or
Cavalry
5 years
guy.
ago. This battle requires a very detailed presentation. So our next meeting,